All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to finally get to show y'all what we've been working on behind the scenes, as well as hearing the feedback and ideas y'all have for me, or answering any questions that are on your mind. For those who don't know me, I'm Joseph Malgin, the Chief Executive Officer here at the Hye Company and the maintainer of Hye Ararat. I really appreciate y'all coming out. This is the first live event we've ever done, and I think it's going to prove extremely valuable in charting the course Ararat is going to take in the future. Without further ado, here's how things are going to work. I have sort of an intro presentation to get y'all in the right mindset to make decisions for Ararat, so I'm going to go through that in a second. Once we finish that, we'll jump right into the DQA. I have a series of topics that I want to dive into during the DQA, and those are outlined on the Linux containers form, and I'll screen share that post, once we get to that section. I think that we'll get to all of them just by answering y'all's questions, so I haven't really structured this, and I've kept it pretty loose. That being said, if I feel that we haven't touched on something important, I'll make sure to bring it up before the end. We'll just see how it goes. I'm anticipating this is going to go between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, but it just however long it takes to answer all y'all's questions and get, a foundation down that we're really confident about. That's really what this is all about. To bring something up, just use the YouTube chat or raise your hand on Zoom. If you raise your hand on Zoom, we can hold conversation directly. So if you have something like really complex, I highly encourage you to join the Zoom, as I want to make sure that I have a solid understanding of what you're trying to communicate. These are really, really, really important foundational decisions. So having like a fullness of clarity in our communication is super important. Also, side note, I know that the Zoom link is like a Texas A&M Zoom link. I'm also aware that I'm wearing like an A&M shirt. I just want to be clear, this event is not endorsed or associated with the university in any way. I don't want to get in trouble for that, but don't want to misconstrue that. Just perfectly clear. That being said, if you happen to go to A&M, message me after the session. I'd love to grab a coffee and chat because I'm down here for literally the whole summer, so I have time to chat. Um, Anyways, with this out of the way, are there any questions about how this is going to work? All right, moving right along. Um, so before we begin, I need to make sure that y'all actually understand what Ararat is. And if you think that you do, I'm telling you that you don't, and you need to pay very close attention to what I'm going to say here. There are two different audiences at this session, and I'm not talking about YouTube versus Zoom. Ararat is actually split into two communities, the Linux containers community and the Hye community. Now, this is actually very significant because these communities generally don't interact with each other. And this session is actually the first time that we've had members of both collaborating in the same room. Generally, because there's like, and we're gonna kind of get into like what the differences are. We generally don't like meld them together like this, but because this is pretty important for both, this is the first time that we're gonna bring them into one place. Now, why does this matter? We're establishing the foundation which the next Hye Ararat is going to be built on. And in order to do that effectively, we need to be able to answer a fundamental question. What is Hye Ararat? Now, the Linux containers community would probably say an Incus UI. However, there's a couple of problems with this definition. First, I personally would disagree with this statement. I think it should be referred to as the best Incus UI. The second issue is, well, the Hye community disagrees. They would define Ararat as a private cloud platform. Now, there's actually a very good reason for this. Linux containers users discover Ararat through Incus, while Hye community members discover Incus through Ararat. In other words, Incus Linux containers community members can get by with just Incus. They install Incus, it does what they need them to do, and that's fine. While the Hye community members discover Incus through Ararat. So what that means is for a Hye community member, Ararat unlocks the workflows needed for their respective use case. So Ararat is the entire stack. So if you're a Linux containers community member, you look at Incus and you're like, this is the tool that I use to build my infrastructure, and you just want Ararat to, kind of enhance that experience. If you're a Hye community member, you don't think about Incus first, you're thinking about Ararat first, and just Incus alone literally isn't going to work for you. So something that's going to surprise both communities is also the Linux containers community has only known Ararat for about 3 months. As you all are aware, we announced the first beta release of Hye Ararat v3 in April. This is the first version that we targeted the Linux containers community and got them involved with Ararat's development. But that v3 doesn't come from nowhere. Ararat has been in development since for a very long time, but we announced the first version back in 2021, and the Hye community has been with us ever since then. So really what this all comes down to is, yes, Ararat can serve the same mission for all of the different community members, but there are vastly different expectations from Ararat depending on which side of the aisle that you hail from. The main impact of the expectations here is the Linux containers community really only cares for Incus feature parity, while the Hye community doesn't really care for feature parity, but does care for simplicity, hyperscaling, multi-tenancy, having a good UX, and performance. Now, these goals are not mutually exclusive, they actually enhance each other, and chasing both is actually how we build something really great, and I think Ararat's evolution speaks for itself there. So I prepared this example to sort of get y'all into the mindset of what each community values in Ararat. So just for the record, this is Hye Ararat Yergu, this is v2. Yerek is v3, which is the version the Incus community is familiar with. So the Incus community hasn't seen this. The Hye community already knows that. In Hye Ararat Yergu, there was this instance settings page, and it was very simple and totally acceptable for the needs of the Hye community. In fact, they loved it. But for the Linux containers community, this looks like a complete nightmare. And honestly, y'all wouldn't even consider installing this. It just doesn't give you enough control, and you wouldn't even call this an Incus UI. Now, we all know what the Incus UI canonical settings page looks like. And to the Linux containers community, that probably seems fine. But would you be shocked to know that the Hye community would take this over the Incus UI canonical settings page despite not having like any options at all? So obviously that doesn't work. So how do we fix this in Yerek? Well, the answer is we think about what both communities are looking for and figure out how we can meet both needs in the same interface. The Incus community simply wanted all of the options to be easily available, while the Hye community wanted simplicity and a low learning curve. So if you look at the component we designed in Yerek, we designed a component that was self-documenting. So it doesn't take getting like a PhD in Incus documentation to configure your instance. And even went as far as doing like robust string parsing to automatically generate dropdowns and typings for the various options. In fact, we supported more options with this than even the official Incus UI canonical in their interface. So we delivered more power for the power users while bringing simplicity to those who are new. The Hye community was absolutely okay with this model. There were some gripes with it. We'll get into that a little bit later. And the Linux containers community responded extremely positively to it. In other words, this is a perfect balance. Now, the reason why I highlight this is just to outline that this dynamic is actually exactly what gives Hye Ararat its edge. No one in the Linux containers community would independently have the 5 years of experience to build this sort of stuff or to understand the perspective of the Hye community and build something so approachable. On the flip side, no one from the Hye community would have the perspective of an Incus power user to even care to implement these power tools. This is why everything that's come before Ararat to the Incus community has failed to gain traction from the outside, and also why Ararat has previously failed to gain traction outside of the Hye community. When we bring these two visions together, that's how you get something really powerful, and that's when Ararat starts becoming something where you can go, okay, Proxmox and VMware need to watch their backs. At the end of the day, you may not care about the specific needs of your outside community. You may only care about the Hye community, you may only care about the Linux containers community, but you probably should, because it will ultimately help grow yours and build a better experience for you. If you like the unique simplicity Ararat brought, you can thank the Hye community for that. And if you like the power tools we brought to Ararat and Yedek, you can thank the Linux containers community for that. My point is, throughout this DQA, always be thinking about both communities because it completely changes the scope of what the definition of Hye Ararat is to you. We need an Ararat that works for everyone, not just a subset of users. And I said this at the very beginning to both communities. So that needs to be thought about from day one. And I just want you to think about that throughout the entire DQA whenever you're, pitching decisions and stuff like that or questioning why do we do things the way we do. It makes sense when you think about the bigger picture. Without further ado, let's get started. So, we have this post here, which are the things that are top of mind here at the DQA today. We can go through any of these topics. You guys, I'm gonna let y'all drive the discussion. You guys can just ask any questions you want or anything like that, and I'll try to weave this stuff in wherever I can in my answers, so we can really start architecting what the foundation is going to look like here. I guess this is kind of where I open the floor to y'all. So if you're on Zoom, you can just raise your hand. And if you're the YouTube chat, you can just ask away. What's the real purpose of developing Ararat? You said that the project exists since 2021. Just wonder what the real intention of developing it was. I thought it was created for Incus only. That's a great question. So just a little bit of history. Back in 2021, the Hye company was a hosting company at the time. And we used solutions like VirtFusion, a virtualizer, like hosting company control panels. And we really weren't happy with them. We kind of wanted like let's say that someone needs to deploy like a game server, like which is an app or a VM, right? We had to have like separate servers for those. We had to use separate control panels. It was like a mess. So we started an in-house effort to develop our own solution to that in-house, and that turned out to be Hye Ararat. Originally, it was built off of LXD, and it was like I think it took about 7 months to develop. Started in November of 2020. We released it in 2021. It was just for internal use at Hye. So if you bought a Hye product at the time, you would be put on Hye Ararat. Later on in 2022, we realized that Ararat has a lot more application outside of that, not just for the Hye company, but maybe for hosting companies and home labs outside of that. So we started developing a release of Hye Ararat that people could actually install themselves and use, and that was also built off of LXD. Now, LXD's API has changed a lot over the years. Like, for example, I think this auth methods. Like for at the time, you know how you have like OpenFGA and Incus now? That wasn't around back then. You know how you have like OpenID Connect support? That wasn't around back then either. So back then, Ararat had to basically recreate the entire backend to communicate. So it was very different. It wasn't something that could just drop in and be an LXD UI. We really didn't see the application for that. That's when we started developing Ararat Yergu. As these APIs started, these tools started becoming integrated into the product, we were like, okay, we could actually turn this into something that could just integrate very seamlessly with LXD. That's when we did our second version. Still very early on, so it had a couple of issues and it wasn't complete. That was kind of what I showed were also the other thing is we weren't actively targeting like the Incus community with like full feature parity or anything like that. So it was still simplified to being something more for like if you're like a user of like a hosting company or something like that. And that was back in 2023. Fast fast forward to 2025, I worked for a company called Zentane, and back then we had ambitions for Ararat as well to make it something more general purpose that like could actually elevate. Because now Incus was around, they had this whole thing with the UI identity crisis and all that. We were like, we've spent like a very long time building these really, really innovative UIs, and we really know what everybody wants with them. Um, we really could just take this and we could extend it into something that the Incus community would be able to use. So what we decided to do is we decided that for the next version of Hye Ararat, it was going to be something where whether you're someone that doesn't know anything about Incus at all, or you're like a power user that knows everything there is to know about Incus, Ararat is, the control plane that you're going to use for that. And that's been in development since 2025, and we announced it late 2025, and we announced it in of um late April of this year. Um and that's the Ararat that the Incus community has seen. Now, that's not saying that we're not still looking to include the features that the people that are used to the old Ararat are in. We're absolutely trying to do that, but we're also trying to make sure that the Incus community has everything they need to do with that. We also know that that comes with differences of governance. Like for example, old versions of Ararat were not so permissively licensed. Here we're doing everything under Apache 2. We do everything open source. We don't even want governance of the core Ararat. We're willing to give up governance to the Incus community instead, and build on top of like extensions and stuff to kind of give the Hye community what they need. And that kind of gets into what I was talking about here, opening the door to Incus integrations. Everything that we want to do with Ararat that isn't core to Incus, we're not going to include in Ararat directly, right? Because we really don't want to overstep where we are with what people are like. If you just want an Incus UI, we don't want to bundle a bunch of stuff into Ararat to make it super heavy. So we're not going to include anything that doesn't go beyond that in the core UI, and we're going to give Incus complete governance over that, if that makes any sense. Um, and anything that we want to add beyond that other groups would need, we're going to use the same integration system that we would use for this. And I can go into that if you're interested in how that's going to work. Does that make any sense? It's a little bit of a complicated history. But basically right now you have like a really, really solid Incus UI, and our goal is, Incus UI that is really easy to understand and simple, that anyone can use, anyone can approach, while also being able to do the things that other people need. That's kind of like what I said in let me show you. I was very careful with my language here. I intentionally said Hye Ararat provides a clean, intuitive dashboard for managing your Incus deployment, and is designed to maintain the power tools one building a hyperscaler would need, right? While maintaining a low enough learning curve for someone running an iMac in your closet. So whether you're running like a home lab that's really, really small, we want Ararat to work for you and not have a high learning curve. But if you need all of those complex tools, and you need like really high scalability, Ararat is built from the core to be able to handle that. And that's why also when we develop Ararat, right, we have this focus on things like performance and scale and data fetching that like no one else developing something like this has. Like in beta 2, we literally wrote a custom Spice client from scratch in Rust just to make it so it would be as seamless and performant as having a desktop client. The reason for that is we want Ararat to be, your all-in-one control plane. We don't want you to have to go and, get a bunch of other stuff to do that. It should be seamless. Same thing applies with the beta 3 data fetching layer. How what we did is we were like, so in the former data fetching layer, we used SWR, which was basically, let's say that you fetch an instance, right? It would be stored in your local storage. It wouldn't show we would do this so it wouldn't show a loading spinner, so it could use stale data, but it would show a little like nice animation. I think I can kind of show. Oh, that's the beta. I think that this is the canonical UI. I think it updated. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So if I go to my network tab, this is beta 4, and I turn on throttling, right? Slow 4G. You see how it's doing that? What that is we store everything locally that's been previously fetched, and we can actually display the data without storing a loading spinner, but we can still indicate that it's stale with an animation like that, and it makes it really fast and responsive. And then we do things like it knows which instances are on my screen and which isn't. And I think this is more apparent with like the file manager. If I go to like the Nginx one and I go to files, let's go to a let's go to a this is actually a bug actually. So in beta 4, this is a part of why we did the rewrite. There are some issues with the data fetching layer, like where it can't figure out what's stale and what's not, right? So sometimes it does this. This is fixed in beta. This is fixed in the rewrite version. It doesn't do this anymore, and we have a really cool different data fetching system for that I'll talk about in a second. But what this actually does is, let's say I go to something that has like, what's a folder that has like a ton of files in it? I think this does. Okay, this has a ton of files in it, obviously, and it obviously loaded very quickly. How is it? But you know the Incus API has to fetch the size separately. How does it do that? Well, it actually knows what's on the screen and what's not. So if I scroll down, it'll fetch more information as I go. So it fetched that live. Um, so like we have this like really big emphasis on performance and scalability and everything that we do, such that literally no matter what you're running, no matter what scale that you go to, Ararat works for you. No matter what your experience level is with Incus, Ararat works for you. No matter what options you need and stuff, Ararat works for you. That's kind of the goal. We want to make a private cloud solution that works for everyone and can scale to any level. That's really what the goal is. And the core of that is an Incus interface. Man, I miss these view transitions. These were so nice. That's the one thing that I'm having trouble bringing back in the rewrite, actually. For the intents and purposes of like the Incus community, you can just think of it like an Incus UI. Like we really try to separate like all the Hye stuff from the Incus stuff as much as we can, because we know that there isn't really converged interest there. But this event was pitched to both sides, and the thinking behind Ararat is it has to do both, so it is relevant to this discussion. Like we're never gonna come into the Incus community and be like trying to like upsell or add any like Hye non-Incus things or anything like that. Like it's there's nothing there's nothing going on here with that either. I know that that's a common thought among projects that work like this. Do you work closely with Zably on the project? No, well, it's a little complicated. Like, so Ararat has the motive, definitely has the objective of becoming the official Incus UI in the future. I think that it is really the when I think of Incus UI, I think on a bigger level. I think of like Incus just reminiscing on the Incus community a little bit from my perspective. I feel like that they need to in order to grow, they need to create more surface area for where people are able to use the product, and that's how they're going to be able to compete with people like Proxmox and stuff like that. I don't believe that anyone else has developed or developed the foundation of an interface that would be able to take it to that level. We don't work closely with Zably on this, but we definitely want to, and we definitely I do discuss things with like Stefan every once in a while about like running things by him and like architecture and stuff like that to be in line with being something that can be actually in line with what the Incus community wants and something that can be distributed effectively. That's actually one of the primary reasons for the rewrite. Was one of the requirements for this is that Ararat needs to rely on Incus as much as possible for the source of truth. So I know that you're probably if you're an Incus user, you're probably familiar with this. If you go to the docs, they have like all of these configurable options here, like like all the different configurable options that we have. And Ararat, host 8443. Ararat is it has literally all of them. And the way that it does this, in this version, I mean, this is kind of like a disaster, but it's able to generate like drop downs and stuff like that. And the way that it does it is like, for example, cluster.evacuate, right? That's documented as like evacuate. So it says available modes, and then it has this markdown dashes. We literally have to do like a string parser that literally like detects, oh, there's a list of things with backticks in them. That must mean that there are options, and it auto generates the drop. Like it's kind of difficult. That's considered hard coding, which is like the borderline of being acceptable and not acceptable. In the rewrite version, one of the complaints we got from the Hye community was, remember how I said earlier, like there are kind of different expectations. Like this is borderline acceptable for the Hye community, acceptable for an Incus user, borderline acceptable to like the LXC org in terms of the way that this works. In the rewrite, we really wanted to make this simpler. So we started having this new system. This is the rewrite, how far we got. This is scrapped. And it's the same configurator component. This is just on projects. And it's obviously incomplete. Like the search results aren't there. It's not markdown parsing and all of that. But we really wanted to make it simpler. So like before it had to render like this, because each one is a separate option, we have these special overrides, which is kind of like hard coding, but not really, because it overrides on top of the object to render things in a way that makes sense and actually provide information that is useful, so you don't ever feel like you're just sifting through the docs, because the Hye community really didn't like how this was. And where one of the blockers came from was, and this isn't rendering, like this would obviously, this would be the hover card system that we have here, like you know how like you hover over this and you get this. We haven't implemented that in the rewrite yet. But we implemented all this cool stuff in the rewrite for the configurable options because we got a lot of feedback on how that was complicated. Like we have this thing that can detect if there's something you could warn, like restrictions must be enabled for this to take effect. We have a fix button that can do that. The resets like worked well and stuff like that. We have these new radio components. Basically, we had to do a bunch of overrides to get this. But one of the things that's important is a lot of options affect each other. Like, for example, if I enable, let's say I set restrictions on a project, right? Like, I'll use the old Ararat as an example. Like, let's say I were to, like, block backups or something, right? In the UI, when I create an instance, it needs to respect that, the options I set there, right? And that's extremely difficult to do when you're auto-generating because it's not documented anywhere what that does. And then you also have situations where setting specific options can inherit from different areas. Like some of these project options we didn't finish this completely, but some of these project options inherit from the server settings. That's a complicated logic path. Setting some options in here change the availability of other options. Basically, what ended up happening was, in order for this to be future proof, this component, we spent like a month developing just this component in the rewrite because of how complicated it was, and we didn't even finish it, right? And as we started developing it, it started to get more and more complicated to the point where we had to request. We were actually saying that we were going to drop development of Ararat temporarily to go fix some of this stuff upstream because it needs to be documented properly for it to work. Also, not even to mention, let's say that you have like permissions, like you have a scriptlet or something like that. That also changes the options that you have available to you. So there also needs to be a way to like determine like what options the user actually has access to set, so we're not rendering things in the UI that are problematic. I had to. I'm on a private tab right now, so it's a little bit complicated to do. I mostly do everything in public that I do, and we initially requested like an access endpoint to fix this, and that was and we have a good endpoint for that. We don't know how we're gonna do it with scriptlets yet though. But the problem was basically I came out, I was like, the configurable options are like problematic basically. We need like access control, logic, stuff like that for this to work. And basically the proposal was we could like do access control and configurable options kind of at the same time. So basically when you request access, it could return like an object of what options you have and like logic that the UI would be able to understand to render. And that sounds like a lot to ask. The Incus API currently is supposed to do something like this, but it's not to that degree of 1.0 metadata config. This I can't even show you. Let me show you on here. This returns a JSON of like the options, but it's just the docs basically, right? Basically we had to create overrides for all of that, and it was coming to the point where it was just way too much to do it. So we wanted to do upstream changes on it, but it turns out that the way that it's documented is like extremely complex. So it's not easy to change upstream. It would probably take like over a year to get all of the options properly done. They already have plans to do it to start the process in 7.4. But basically the real problem is, the crux of the issue is, let's say that we continue developing this rewrite the way that we did, right? Which is very complicated to do because we're basically redoing all the configurable options work. But ignore that for a second. And let's say that they do fix the upstream changes, which honestly it should be fixed because this is not sustainable. When they fixed this, right, this would have to be completely rewritten again. So basically, Ararat's development. So when you ask, do we work closely with Zapply on this project? No, but we are extremely responsive to the requirements of the Incus project, to the degree where we'll do like complete rewrites and stuff like that, just depending on what the requirements are there. And that's exactly why this got scrapped. This would be too much to maintain if it ever went under the LXC roof. They wouldn't be able to maintain that for a while, because this, and it could break in the future. So it's kind of a iffy situation where we have the development expectations to have that close like working level, right? But we don't. And it's a kind of a difficult place to be, especially for me. But the new architecture that we're proposing that I did want to get into is basically what we wanted to do to prevent any future rewrites while being able to do stuff is we were going to create an architecture where Ararat kind of works like a framework. So basically, all of the UI logic. So you have like our data fetching layer, our Incus like communication, our state management, our UI components. That's one thing, right? And then we were gonna have something where it wires up to the actual interface that's rendered completely separately. So basically, what would happen under a situation like that is, let's say that there were major API changes in the future, like this, right? um, what we would be able to do is we would be able to adopt those without like rewriting the entire component. It would be very easy to integrate in, which is kind of the focus of this rewrite. The whole architecture of this rewrite, it's very over engineered. But the reason why it is we don't want to have a situation where, let's say that this moves on into the community under the LXC org at some point, which is our goal. We don't want them to ever have to do a major refactor or a rewrite as Incus evolves. We want Ararat to be able to seamlessly evolve with Incus as it does. That being said, this is still very much an issue. And to the Hye community that expects like simplicity and stuff like that, I just have to tell you, we don't have a way to re-implement this with the new architecture until the changes are upstream. There just isn't a way to do it. We have this thing that we're thinking about, where and I wrote about it here, where we would allow like basically extensions into Ararat, where basically you would set like a incus.ui, sorry, a config.ui dot maybe like extension host, and it has like a list of remotes that it can load JS extensions in live from, right? Theoretically, we could use that to deliver an experience like this without making it so you would have to rewrite the whole thing, because it would just change the behavior, but someone would have to maintain that whole thing and it would be like a disaster. So, yeah, that's kind of the state of like Incus, Ararat collaboration, how we're thinking about that. We're very much, everything that we do, we want to make sure that it's in line with what with maintainability with the Incus community and what they're looking for. But obviously that creates a lot of extra engineering that has to be done in terms of the framework. Now, in terms of governance, because I am talking a lot about like working and stuff like that, the way that we would organize it is this. So I did mention in the post, I said that in theory, the new Ararat is so modular that it could actually, like the way that we're theorizing the architecture is that it could actually be used to build interfaces that are not even web, like native mobile apps, because the JS logic is decoupled from the UI. So theoretically, since that's separated, you could use it in React Native because the state management works the same. So what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to have a Hye repository under the Hye org, Hye company slash probably like framework. Same licensing, Apache 2, all of that. And what that's going to have is it's going to have the data fetching system in it, the UI components, all of that, not specific to Ararat. You could use it in any project. It's basically our own custom React framework. We'll maintain that. So the Incus community doesn't have to worry about maintaining all of that, right? You drop that into the Ararat repository. It's dependent on that. And all you do is you code out the things related to Incus. That's all you have to worry about maintenance. We handle the way that the buttons look, comes from upstream. The way that the sidebar layout works comes from upstream. The way that the internal data fetching and caching, all this complex engineering, comes from upstream, made completely modular within that. The only thing that y'all need to worry about is wiring to Incus. That's what we really want to do. So we want to create a system where the framework is our problem, because that's actually the only reason why we're doing all that is actually really because of requirements of us. Like we need something that can scale, right? Like having like a data fetching system and stuff like that. That's not something that Incus really needs. That's more so something that we need. So it makes sense that we're gonna maintain that. And then it would make sense that Incus would want the part that actually works with Incus and involved with that. So that's kind of our approach with regards to that, which I think is really interesting. I will say that extensions thing is really messing with my brain because I have a lot of different ways I can do it, but some of it compromises like the cross-platform functionality of it. And the other problem is, let's say that we use like protocol buffers, so like third-party things like I know Incus Compose is a popular thing that just came out. Let's say that they wanted to make a UI that integrated in Ararat. Like Ararat can be aware of like your Incus Compose stuff and the health of stuff and all of that. Let's say they wanted to do that, right? They could use that extension system to do that. But the thing that we have to think about when we design it is, let's say that we do want Ararat to be something that's cross-platform, meaning that you can make a React Native app out of it and stuff like that. How do we handle injecting stuff into there then? Because um, live code execution in a mobile app isn't going to get approved by the App Store, and that's dangerous if we were to do that. It's not like a JavaScript sandbox. Are they going to ship everything in JavaScript, run it in like a web worker, and then render like UI components we predefine? Like, then you can't have custom logic in there. So for the extensibility, how much do we bring over to the other platforms, and do we even allow them to bring that to the mobile apps? I don't know. Do we even go with the mobile app route? I don't know if we do that either. But I will say this: the framework that we have for the web UI is I'm so happy with it. I'm so proud of it. I think I kind of just explained it. I think if you have any questions about it and that any of it doesn't make sense, please let me know. I love what we did with it. Um, will allow third-party extensions to securely load into Ararat seamlessly. So if you maintain any Incus tooling, that's a great opportunity to get everything all embedded in there. We're even going to allow you to hook into. So Ararat has this robust system for like hooking into the event listener and committing actions on specific events that manipulate like the state of things. We'll allow you to hook into that. Will like it's going to unlock a whole new level of the types of integrations that you're going to be able to have with the greater. It's I kind of see Ararat right now. If we do successfully pull this off, it's kind of going to be a surface that could bring all of the Incus tooling kind of together, which is really cool to think about. But we need to get an architecture down where that's easy to do and seamless. And we I don't want. I will say this: let's say that someone developed their own interface for their own tool, right? Like let's say that there was like a web interface for managing something like, I don't know, distro builder, right? I wouldn't want them going if they let's say they decided to do it with Ararat, right? Ararat needs to provide all the APIs that it will be just as good if they were to do it outside, right? So we need to be really smart about it. It needs to be in a way where it's not going to decrease the experience as if they did it on their own, but also really seamlessly integrates everything under that one um, roof. And it's a very ambitious architecture, but the payoff in terms of first off, maintainability is gonna be wonderful. Like it's gonna be so easy to maintain our route when we have a structure like this in place. And then the second thing is, if we do successfully pull off that extensions system that I'm thinking about right now, um, I think that we're gonna have a lot of tools built around Incus that are gonna like. And the other thing that it does is this. So obviously, a constraint of Ararat is we don't want Ararat to like have like anything on the server side, right? Like Ararat should not maintain any sort of server side state and stuff like that. That being said, one of the reasons why UIs that compete with Ararat in the Incus community, which they haven't really gained a lot of traction, have their own things is they try to add functionality outside of Incus on top of it, right? Basically what we're saying is, yeah, you can do that within Ararat. It just needs to be an extension, and you can now maintain that separately. So it actually solves this. This has been a huge problem in the Incus community in terms of like where do things that need state and go outside the scope of Incus sit in relation to the UI. This answers that question and it solves that problem, and I really hope that we can figure out something with that. It would be really cool, especially if we can figure it out. Imagine if we could get native mobile apps rendering components with like third-party integrations. That would be really cool. Um, if anyone here maintains any Incus projects, Incus tooling, um, definitely talk to me about that. Like, um, I really want to make that happen. Like, that would be really cool. Um, yeah, that was a big tangent from do we work closely? But I think that's what kind of what I said at the start. Like, I can answer pretty much all of these points just from answering one question because they all kind of relate to each other in a unique way, which is kind of nice. I hope that kind of made sense. You know, I think I've actually knocked out some of this. I just knocked out this, right? Potentially open the door to third party and render. Yep. Decoupling. Yep. Prior unpublished. I haven't really gotten too. Does anyone want to know about this? I kind of got into it a little bit. I think I got into some of what changed, not all of it. Um, I can get more into that if anyone's curious. Just say the word. Um, Modularity is the answer to this. New contribution guidelines. Ooh, this is interesting. I think I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna go into this. So Ararat in the past has had pretty simple contribution guidelines. It was just it was so simple that just to create filler, we were like, oh, book the repository and sign off thing, right? And basically we had this DCO that you signed off of, right? Now, I know that when I talk about DCO, the second that the words come out of my mouth and I start saying it, and especially when as I'm bringing up the Hye company, immediately red flags start going off like, oh no, he's gonna try to no, no, no. It's actually the complete opposite. I don't think that this protects you enough, in terms of Ararat, and I'm gonna explain why. Um, these are the new Ararat contribution guidelines. Um, Obviously go straight to the thing. But the thing I want to get into is this new thing that we have called the Developer Contribution Agreement. Again, alarm bells are probably going off in your head right now. Don't worry, you should read it. Um, it kind of works like the DCO. You're not allowed to edit the contents of the DCO, but we did something smart about that. So basically, what this is all really about is Ararat is a web interface. So obviously it gets a lot of code. Uh, there's tons of libraries that are obviously going to be used, like React, maybe some ShadCN components, stuff like that. Those are not licensed under Apache. Those are under MIT. We don't have the right to relicense that. Number one. Number two, a lot of the time, someone might be making a contribution, especially with this modular structure. Someone might be making a contribution to Ararat that they want to make under a more permissive license other than Apache. Now notice I said more permissive. I didn't say less permissive. We do not allow things like GPL and stuff like that. Anything that's more restrictive than Apache, no. Automatic reject. But more permissive we will allow. But we have to be careful about that. And that's what this is for. So basically what we do is we get a little bit, and this is also to kind of protect, this is not about protecting the Hye company. It doesn't actually protect us at all. This is actually about protecting you as an Ararat user, because some people will do things with contributions in the courts to get people in trouble, and this protects you. So basically what we do is we say, okay, the project license is Apache 2, right? The DCO is, standard DCO. right? Now here's what we use. Here's what we do. We use this specification called reuse, and what it does, and this is relevant to you if you're going to be an Ararat contributor, is basically you need to, on your code, whenever you contribute code, you need to mark the license that you're licensing under in the file. Just a little comment, spdx header, like spdx, I think it's like license colon Apache 2. Just to confirm that you're licensing the code under that, and if it goes anywhere, it's licensed correctly. This is actually something Incus doesn't do. I'm actually kind of surprised because it's kind of a big project. I wish that they would adopt this because this is kind of important. But it also allows you to like license out, like mark licensing for like snippets of code. So like let's say that we take something like a component that's MIT, but we modify it. We can license our modifications under Apache 2 and it can have all the proper protections then. So that's very important for things like that. So basically what this does is it explicitly, this is just explicitly licenses everything under a license that's appropriate. It's just a specification for marking your stuff. Don't need to worry too much about that. Then what we do is we define differential contribution parts. Anything that's marked as this, you only need to worry about if you're licensing under other than Apache 2. So let's say that you want to contribute something under MIT, or you want to contribute something under some permissive BSD license, right? Then this applies to you. If you're just going to license under Apache 2, none of this is applicable to you. Don't even worry about it, okay? The indicated license, which is how we figure out what license things are under, is simply what it purports to be, right? And if it's not purported to be anything, it's Apache. So basically what we're saying is, unless you say otherwise, again, it's a little complicated because this is more just for legal protection on you as an Ararat user, right? Because the maintainers, every single maintainer that contributes code owns the copyright. This is to protect you as an Ararat user. It's not like a CLA or anything like that. It's actually the opposite. So basically what this is saying is the default license of your contribution is Apache unless you say otherwise. Now let's say that you say otherwise. Basically what we say is you agree to disclose what license that is prominently. So what this is basically for is, let's say that you make a contribution of a differential part and you didn't really read through this and it's GPL, right? We don't accept GPL3 contributions, right? But the problem is, if we review your code not knowing that it's GPL, and then only find out after we've done the review, maybe it's not prominently marked or it's in small text or at the bottom or whatever, then we just poisoned ourselves to whatever you attempted to contribute. So we have to be very careful about that. We cannot review anything that's under GPL. So if you are going to submit something that's not under Apache 2, you agree to prominently disclose what license that's under, okay? You also agree that it'll be marked using that specification that I said earlier. Again, only applies if you're doing a differential contribution part. You also certify that to the best of your knowledge, whatever license you're choosing to use is compatible with Apache. So basically what this says is, hey, I didn't just try to, let's say you did try to push in GPL code, right? Basically what this says is I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to do that. And, again, it's about protecting you, protecting the project. And then what this does is, what's the issue with, this is actually probably the most coolest part of what we did. Let's say that you license under MIT or BSD or whatever, right? Well, those are great licenses, but the problems are, you'll notice that this doesn't grant an irrevocable copyright license to whoever uses the project. It's not irrevocable. So what someone could do is they could contribute MIT like code to the code base, right? And then theoretically, they could say, actually, that code shouldn't be included in the project anymore. And then what would happen is everyone that's using Hye Ararat would be fucked and screwed. Sorry, excuse my language. Would be screwed. That's bad. That's why a lot of projects enforce like Apache 2. Now, Ararat's a web UI, so it's in a unique situation where inevitably some of the logic is probably going to be MIT or whatever. So what we say is, where I am the copyright holder of this, and this is exactly the language that the Apache license uses. It's just copied straight from the Apache license. A perpetual, worldwide, non-exclusive, no-charge copyright license. Now, I know as soon as I get into copyright and I'm saying DCA, you're probably like, oh my gosh, the Hye company is taking copyright. No, we're not. We are saying that you are saying that the people that use Ararat have the right to use your code. You're still the copyright holder, okay? It's the same thing the Apache license does. We're not taking your copyright, okay? This is not a CLA. It's the opposite, as I said. Where I hold, this is the patents thing. So there's was a thing back in the day, and Apache and it's still technically possible if you're not under Apache. And Apache covers this, where patents. Let's say that someone holds a patent to something, right? And they contribute code to the code base that is under their patent, right? And we don't know that it's under their patent, right? And we accept it. And then they sue everyone that installs it afterwards, so all the Ararat users, for patent infringement. That's called patent trolling. MIT, because it was written in the 80s or in these other licenses, don't take that into account. So what we do is we take the exact same license from Apache and we basically say, you can't do that. So literally what we do is you can take a more permissive license, right? You can contribute it. All we add to it is basically the protections that Apache guarantees the people that use the code base. So basically, despite us accepting code that is MIT or whatever, right? There is a paper trail saying that that there are no problems with that, right? And then basically what we do is, because the way that this is defined is a little different, is it's exactly the same as the DCO. And again, all of this doesn't apply to you if you're just going to contribute under Apache. This doesn't matter, right? So really, if you're just contributing like normal, right? I certify every identifiable portion of the contribution under the DCO. And then all we do is we say, because the DCO says the open source license indicated in the file, because we accept snippets to be licensed differently, this definition doesn't work for us, so we just say the indicated license shall be read as the indicated license. So it's the same thing. It just now allows it not to just be scoped to files, but be scoped to portions. So it's protecting you. None of this is taking away we don't take away any rights with this. For the purposes of Clause B, as indicated in the file shall likewise be read as the indicated license. Same thing. We're just saying, portions are licensed correctly. And then what we do is, so in other projects, like this was written, so context on the DCO, this was written by the Linux kernel after there was some lawsuit and stuff like that. They enforced SPDX headers, just like we're doing in Ararat, right? But it says at the bottom, I agree and understand this project and contribution are public record, blah, 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 and may be redistributed to this project and the open source license is involved. Well, if you didn't indicate what license it's licensed under, then this doesn't work. You get what I'm saying? You could maybe somehow merge something with a license file in a GitHub project that's Apache 2 without explicitly saying that you're licensing it under Apache 2. This clause doesn't really work. That's also something a gripe I have with Incus not doing their headers. I hope that there's an Incus maintainer watching this and realizing, please put enforced license headers in your files. You're currently living off of DCO for your enforcement. Yes, it's good. It's better than nothing. It's great. It's very effective, but it's not bulletproof. So what we do is we just add this. I submit every identifiable portion of the contribution under the license that I indicated. That's it. So basically, it's very similar to the DCO. It's just appropriate to the code base. It's a DCO. But if we called it a DCO, that would be deceptive. So we call it a DCA. We also call it a DCA because if you're doing differential, you do agree to disclose this. So it's more of an agreement in some cases. Again, if you're doing Apache 2, you just think of it like a DCO. It's identical. Sign-offs work the exact same way. You just sign off just like normal. And that's how you agree to the DCA. It's the same thing. So contributing to Ararat is very similar to contributing to Incus. Just keep this in mind when you're contributing code that for whatever reason you don't want under Apache 2, that you want under MIT or something more. Again, more permissive. I also make it very clear here, just so there's no confusion, this is not the DCA. We say you cannot do GPL, LGPL, AGPL, anything copyleft. This includes code that you wrote after viewing or referencing, re-implementing similar logic, blah, 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 blah. Like, we're very clear on this. There's no room for any confusion of any sort. And it's also very clear, how you do this. Now, this sounds like a lot to digest. Like, you're probably like thinking right now, oh my gosh, I need to think about constantly doing DCA sign-off, and doing my license headers wherever I have. No, you don't. What we've done is we're developing GitHub Actions. So typically in a repository, a GitHub action will just look at whether or not you complied, and it will just fail the check if you didn't. That's not what we do. Yes, it fails the check, but what it will do is it will leave a comment on your PR telling you the exact instructions to fix the problem. So let's say that you didn't agree to the DCA. It'll say, like, you didn't sign off. You didn't do a sign off. It'll say, you need to agree to the DCA before contributing this code. And then it will show on GitHub you can have like a collapsible markdown. It'll show under a collapsible markdown. It'll say click here if you agree. You click it, and then it will show you instructions for. Let's say you have many commits in there. It'll give you the instructions. Like if you agree to the DCA, when you run these commands, it will do the sign off. So we give you the instructions on how to properly amend the commits right there, right? Very easy to contribute. You don't even have to think about this anymore, right? Let's say that you didn't follow the reuse specification in your thing, right? Same thing. In fact, we make it even easier. It will look at the name and email that you used in your sign-off, and what it will do is it will generate a commit suggestion in all the areas that you contributed with it'll suggest Apache 2, and it will suggest your name and email and the current year as the copyright holder, and you just press accept suggestion, like you committed, and it's done. So this sounds like a lot. You're probably thinking oh, it's probably so much work to contribute to Ararat. We are building tools in the repository, in the PR system, so you don't even have to think about this. It's all handled for you automatically, and we want to make contributing as seamless as possible. At the same time, Ararat is something used by a variety of users. It's going to be used by hyperscalers. It's going to be used by home labs. It's going to be used by many people. We need to make sure that the people that use it don't need to worry about some guy contributing something under GPL when they're not supposed to and poisoning the entire code base, or someone playing some game with the courts where they try to sue everyone that uses Ararat because they revoke their copyright to something that they submitted under MIT. So again, not a CLI. Every maintainer is the copyright holder for their thing. Nothing going on there. It's literally, basically a DCO. It's in the same spirit of the DCO, and it works pretty much the same way. And the full text will be available on the rewrite repository when we finish. We're not pushing it until we finish all of the tooling. I know that some people probably have some opinions about this. If you have them, the perfect opportunity is to talk to me about it now while I'm live and thinking about this. So yeah. So those are the contribution guidelines. That's right. Oh, speaking of, AI tools and your Ararat contributions, including the various scopes in which they're permitted. This is a great topic. So remember how I mentioned that the foundation is going to be sort of separated from the main repository, correct? Um, what we're going to do is we can have more permissive and less permissive AI policies depending on the repository you're working on. So the framework is under one repository. The stuff that gets wired is under another repository. And they're kind of modules that kind of come into each other. Because the modules are separate, the actual Ararat codebase that you work on with Incus, you can use AI tools on without worrying about breaking anything used elsewhere because the code actually isn't even there for the AI tool to change. It's installed via a node module. So um, on the framework area, we do not want any AI used. We want no AI use at all on the framework. The framework must be rock solid. It's not just used in Ararat. It's used. It's like a React framework. It needs to be perfect. It's probably also going to be used to build mobile apps and stuff like that. Um, no AI contributions on that. And you probably don't even have to worry about that because we're building that, and we have reasons outside of Ararat. The Hye company itself, Ararat is in the future not going to be the only thing that we do. We have other things that we're making as well, and it's going to depend on the same React framework. So you don't have to worry about that. Same licensing policy, Apache 2, DCA, all that. It's great. No AI use on the frameworks, the things that are consumed and reused everywhere. On Ararat itself, though, where things are wired, you can absolutely use AI because there is no risk anymore of like contaminating the rest of the interface with like bad logic or anything like that. Like that bug I showed with the data fetching layer, that was actually an AI induced bug, believe it or not. The AI model didn't fully understand the way that I wanted the revalidation to work as I was tweaking it. And I didn't catch that it made that mistake. And if I had written the logic for that, it wouldn't have happened. Now in the rewrite, there has been all the code that I showed in the rewrite today. There is no AI. I wrote all of that. The data fetching layer in that completely written by me. The configurable options system completely written by me. Um, there is none. So the base that we established with the rewrite is already pretty good. Oh, there's also some other features that we introduced in the rewrite that I think are kind of cool. Like you can probably see the UI looks a little bit different. You can finally delete. You can edit projects that are not selected now finally. So if you hover over something, why is that not working? All right, apparently it doesn't work. Oh, I know why it doesn't work. It's because I haven't implemented that. And you can delete projects. You couldn't do that before either. The UI obviously looks a little bit different. We updated the consumer library. We used this really great library for building out all of our components, and they had some updates. So as we were doing the rewrite, we took the opportunity to kind of upgrade the base there. Um, this is just a demo of like the data fetching layer. Don't even worry about that. But yeah, the foundation. This is entirely the foundation can't have any AI use. It's just not allowed. But the part that is wired can. In the past, we've had some really good tools for that. Like on the old repository, we had we even went as far as having custom skills with custom scripts for searching the Incus API docs, fetching API definitions and stuff like that. And even like reviewing like the Go types of Incus, so the AI model has like a full understanding whenever you're using an agent in there. We had like all sorts of skills and guidelines and stuff like that for the way that things were going to work. Like we package each repository with skills built in that make your AI model understand everything correctly. And we've done that in the past, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. Uh, the things that are upstream, like the things that are packaged, that come in, like that framework and stuff like that. Again, no AI use allowed on that. We'll well, you can use an AI model to like advise you and help you understand things, like a tool, right? Just we don't want AI models doing refactors to the code base there because it's extremely important. So we're very careful about that. And again, that's something that we learned from. You literally saw the bug in real time with the state management on beta 4. Not the state management, the stale aspect of it. So yeah, that's the new stuff to do with contributions. Oh, do you plan to make another video about uh Ararat once beta 5 will be released? Something less technical like installing, showing web UI functionality. Maybe. I don't know. Uh, we're definitely not going to do like a DQA like this. Once we do that, like to the technical level of this, because this is more about like figuring out like the foundations and stuff like that, and just discussing that with the community and encouraging like contribution and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely wouldn't be as technical if we did like a video or something like that. Um, in the past, we have done video like as I explained, Ararat's been around for a long time, and if you look at the YouTube channel this is being broadcast on, we've done events in the past. Okay, I forgot the Hye company isn't that big. That's embarrassing. In the past, we have done things like that. So like in 2022, when we released the first version of Ararat to the Hye community, this wasn't for we weren't targeting Incus at the time. Let me see. In the past, we have. Oh, that's me. How do I get to my YouTube channel? Actually, wait. I have a link right here. Yeah. In the past, we have we've had like fun like marketing videos showing off like what the interface looks like. This is usually once we have like a stable release or we're introducing something new. This was a year ago. This was the first this not the first version that we brought like to public. And we had like a presentation that I gave like about that where I got into like all sorts of nitty gritty. That was the marketing video, but I had like a presentation that I gave like over the way that things worked and the architecture and stuff like that. It wasn't really that technical. It was like demos and stuff like that. So potentially, potentially yes. I don't know about it being beta 5. If I did, it would probably be something like this, where it's pre-recorded and very polished and well put together, and it would probably be for the stable release. Um, and I really love doing stuff like that because I feel like these like things where I can like really like give like a visual medium. Yeah, just raise your hand. Yeah, just raise your hand, and then I'll bring you up in a second. Yeah. Um. So yeah. Having like a visual medium like this is pretty. It won't let you. You go to the reactions tab. There should be like a react button, and then just press like um. There should be a hand raise button. So right now you're on the thumbs up. There you go. And then now it should allow me to do this. Should have sent you a notification to unmute.
Good. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Tell me when you have the time to
No,
answer
I
the
do.
question.
I just finished the last topic, so you know.
Okay. Sorry for coming late.
No, you're good.
Stefan wrote something important about stateless, having error at stateless. Do you keep with that?
Yes, absolutely. We're keeping Ararat stateless. We are not putting any state in Ararat. We are completely adhering to that. We have no intention of making Ararat have any sort of server side backing built into that. There are no plans to change that. We think that this is actually a good thing. We believe in client side rendering stuff, because that's what allows us to do all of our cool caching stuff. Now, the area that is not that wouldn't be stateless is, let's say so we're gonna have like an extension system where in your Incus config, so like Incus docs. And this may be relevant to Incus Compose too if you wanted to integrate with this. So there's currently a .ui. No, that's not instance options. Bro, we gotta do something about these docs at some point. Like, every single time. It kills me. Server, that's it.
Are you looking for the user config?
No, there's a .ui. Oh yeah, user config. Yeah, you're right. User.ui, right? So what we would do is we'd probably have a key like user.ui like extension host or something. And then what we would do is you'd have like a comma separated list of HTTP targets, like https://example.com/asdf. And these Ararat will connect to when you load on the client side, and they can inject hooks and new views and logic into the client side client, right? So what this does is, if you have something like a Incus tool, or maybe you want to do something that does require something stateful or add something outside of Incus, you can code that. You can code a separate backend for it, and you can integrate it with this. But it's outside of Ararat. It's loaded in dynamically. Like let's say that like you had like
the JavaScript which you load on demand.
Yeah. I think that, well, it depends on how we want to do it. So one of the things with Ararat right now is we're considering currently also taking the same code base and allowing it to compile to like a mobile app. That changes the calculus for the way that the extension system would have to work. But if we were going to do it with the web, yes, it would be entirely with JavaScript. We currently use Vite. I think there's like some Vite external like component loader thing. I forgot what it was called. There's like a Vite plugin, Vite load component from external source live on client. There's like something for this. I forgot what it was called. It's not an import file. It's something like this. But there's a way where you can like set like an option where they can be like dynamically selected. So we would probably use something like this. But yes, for the purpose of the question, Ararat completely stateless. Anything stateful has to be an extension, and that's a separate project if they wanted to do that. The project maintainer would write the extension host, and then the user would just put it in the Incus config, and Ararat would just work out the box. But Ararat itself, completely stateless.
Nice. Bad for me, but nice for you, for the Incus for the normal community, which isn't using Incus Compose.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
Very nice.
One of the things I was thinking about with that is like currently like you also have a lot of really cool projects in the Incus ecosystem that I did notice. Like there's this thing called SSH to Incus, I think. Let me see. This just comes to mind because I saw they had some sort of interface. But they felt like they had to did they show any screenshots? Yeah, they felt like for their project, which is like they have like a custom like SSH management system and stuff like that, they felt like they had to make like a whole like interface just to add some of the functionality to it. And it came to the point where it's kind of like turning into like a Hye Ararat because of how complex it was getting. And there's a lot of repeat work that goes on when people do this, especially because we're going to be building reusable components for all of this. Like we're going to have a reusable component for project selection, reusable component for profile selection, reusable component for image selection that you could seamlessly use in the extensions. So I feel like this is actually very good for the ecosystem in general, because a lot of if you're a user of Incus who uses a lot of different Incus tools, You probably are keeping track of a couple web interfaces right now that have some um, repetitive actions associated with them. So that's something definitely to look forward to. The other thing is things that are existing that don't necessarily need a UI. Um, Definitely could integrate with Ararat and do some really cool things. Like I'm just thinking of like um maybe you have like a CI that builds images. You could make an extension host in Ararat that lets you see the status of that and everything and manage that from there. Maybe like manage distro builder deployments and stuff like that. Basically, what it does is it allows you to have this whole host of Incus tools that do things with Incus, kind of have it all under the same roof. So Ararat turns from just being the web interface to being like the framework for presenting everything to do with Incus under that unified control plane. And what's really, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is I know that there's a lot of talk about like backup solutions in the Incus community right now, like custom backup solutions, right? You look at like Proxmox, they have like a separate like custom Proxmox backup server panel, and it's like I hate the idea of having things like separate and stuff like that. If you had this, the backup solution that you use could literally make a extension host for Ararat that allows you to natively manage your backups with the full functionality that they have with their stateful external service and all that in Ararat without modifying any Ararat code, without having to rebuild Ararat, without having to change any of the files. You literally just set a configurable option pointing to what is hosting the extension, and voila. So, and the only reason why we can do that, it's so funny. Usually we wouldn't do something like that because that is an engineering challenge, like beyond. It's really difficult to make something like that. But because we're kind of forced right now to create Ararat in kind of this like really modular way, um, it's not as much. We're already approaching so much in terms of like modularity and stuff like that. It's not too much extra engineering to just go out and make an extension system out of it. And it's also actually not too much engineering to let it compile the mobile apps either, because it can be shared with React Native too. The only question, I guess, the thing that I really want to think about that I think is worth discussing with the greater community, and I did kind of want to get into this, but there aren't a lot of people here, is it's kind of like Ararat kind of exposing not an API, but like a SDK almost. What should that SDK like look like from like the user perspective, like for the developers, and how should that work? Like we could like make it where like you like export like a JSON that like defines like your UI structure and stuff like that. But then Ararat has to like there's a big performance overhead to like the string parsing associated with that that blocks the main thread. Now it's not really noticeable, but it kind of sucks. So there's a lot to think about with it, but it's definitely a promising idea, and I think that again, these are things that take Ararat from just being an Incus UI to being like what you think about when you think about this is my this is my private cloud. This is where I have all of my infrastructure. Giving users one place to control all that is so so good. Like is the key to everything, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is like one of the best ideas that we've had. But and I'm really excited about it. But it's gonna be difficult.
Once implemented dynamical loading yet JavaScript, and it was very, very, very hard. It was like 4 or 5 years ago. I also thought about that, and I think the simpler you keep the core, the better for you and for everyone else.
So we've actually done it before. in Ararat, what is it called? In the first version of Ararat, which was built on a similar stack to this one, believe it or not, we did have an extension system that worked in a similar way, but it used like JSONs, and it could inject JS logic as well. But what we did, and this was really cool, and this was before Ararat was a like Incus, trying to be like an Incus project, is this was like for the Hye company at the time, is we changed the image format so the images could ship with extensions built into them. So if you used like a image, it could like add views to the panel all the code for it was in the image itself, and that was really cool. So we kind of know how to do it. Again, the panel's already modular, so it's not too complicated. The fact that we're built on V makes it a lot easier. So it's not too much of complication. Honestly, the JS loading part isn't the hard part. The hard part is Ararat does a lot of state management. Like everything in Ararat to do with the data fetching layer is a shared state, and there's a lot of like React context associated with that. Um, Making sure that passing all of that to the extensions is going to be the hardest part of that. That's the real engineering challenge to do with it, especially in a manner that's cross-platform. That's also why we'd have to probably develop like an SDK for it. Like we'd probably have to develop some sort of like a library for building this stuff, and then that library in the UI would be able to parse what that means and understand, okay, this is something that's going to be linked to this state. Um, but I think Vite has the tools for it. We're definitely not gonna if it becomes something way too like complex, like gets out of hand. Like let's say this is something that takes more than like I would say more than 3 weeks of development on like the extensions hosts core, right? That's when we would be like, okay, we're not gonna do it. We're gonna drop it. But I think it's doable. The other thing definitely is the Hye community. Again, I kind of opened the presentation. I don't know if you were there for that. Is the Ararat community is consolidated into two. There's the Incus community and there's the Hye community. Both have very different expectations of what Ararat is able to do because the Incus community uses Ararat to manage Incus, but the Hye community uses Ararat as their entire private cloud thing, and that requires a very high level of simplicity. So some of the features we have to remove because of the constraints of the rewrite, especially with the configurable options, the Hye community will not accept. Like for like I mentioned here current features that are going away but will make a come back as Incus as upstream functionality. This in the rewrite, this like structured thing that we spent like a month on this is gonna have to completely go away and go back. It's actually gonna be worse. It's gonna be worse than this. This was not bad with like the string parsing and stuff we did, but this still did string parsing and stuff, which is like borderline hard coding, kind of. So I would consider this not allowed either. So we're gonna have to eliminate this too, and like the Hye community is gonna be really upset. So we actually sort of need the extension system because we would likely, for the purposes of like the Hye part, need to develop an extension that hooks into this and normalizes it for them because they cannot have. Let me install. What I'll do is I'm gonna change this. This actually, you know what's funny about this? I guarantee you this is using some sort of hard coding, like for the allowed block stuff. So actually, this is technically probably in violation of what the constraints that we were doing, which is kind of fun. But yeah, we can't ship something like this. It won't be accepted by it would probably be accepted by the Incus community, but it would not be accepted by the High community. We're willing to ship it in the short term. We're not willing to ship it in the long term. Um, Also, I think it kind of also comes back to thinking Incus UI. Why are we developing an Incus? Why does Incus need a UI? Well, the reason is one of the main reasons is to increase the distribution surface that Incus has. Many people are not comfortable with using like a CLI. Many people also are not comfortable with like really complex data structures and stuff like that. If you develop a UI with the thought of it just being like an abstraction of the CLI or whatever, and just like dump all this technical information in like this is done, all you're gonna really get is people that are currently already comfortable in Incus. Maybe you'll get some people that like were borderline between like Proxmox and Incus, and they go Incus because it finally has a UI, so they're like, oh, it's better than nothing. I have a UI, but it's not gonna do what it needs to do. Um, the approach that Ararat takes of uh, with the requirements that the uniquely the High community has, which is more akin to like something like Proxmox or like VMware, we develop the UI in a way where it can meet the needs of both. So we keep all of the power tools available, but we also are not we're comfortable with some level of, I don't want to say abstraction, but um I don't have a better word, so I'm going to say abstraction. But it's not really abstraction because we're not really abstracting it. I don't really know what word to use. But yeah, there's a big difference between this. Okay, I've lost I reinstalled my old Ararat, so I don't have it. The Ararat that we shipped before, and this. Now, the thing is, here's the problem. This is gonna shock y'all if you're from the Incus community. But you see this? This is very simple, right? And this is great. This is a big improvement over the LXC one. This is unacceptable to when we ship this to the. Oh, sorry, I missed the raise hand.
No problem, no problem. Proxmox does something nice with advanced features. They just put them behind an advanced knob button. I'm sorry, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
worst German.
we don't want to. We don't want to put it behind an advanced knob necessarily because that kind of removes um the level of like control a little bit because it kind of abstracts. Also, the problem. I'm pretty sure that they just like they just do like I don't know if I have a screenshot.
The left one, the first one.
This one? This one.
The first. Yeah, yeah, this one. Yeah, this is with the advanced.
Yeah,
Open
so
with the advanced features.
the issue with this is actually this is not awful. I kind of I'm not opposed to that. I mean that's actually not bad. Actually it's kind of similar to, I would actually argue that's actually exactly what we were doing here. Ignore like the we didn't finish implementing like the rendering and of like the hover cards and stuff, but that's kind of like what we were doing here. Um, I guess the main issue is we can't have when we shipped to this, the High community revolted to this, and this is considered simple by the standards of the Incus community. The High community did not like this. We got a lot of feedback that the basic options like that are essential, like setting the CPU and the memory, were way too difficult to find, even though it's like resource limits. We were also told that the options and the drop downs aren't very like descriptive and stuff like that. And that it was difficult to understand, that things weren't like organized well, stuff like this. That's because this is generated from like the docs. right? So that's kind of what made us go in the direction of this. It was actually pretty much all the feedback that we collected from the Hye community because this is something that they would accept. The problem is this creates a high amount of hard coding, so we're kind of in a limbo, you know. So
In a loop. Mhm.
we're kind of in a limbo where we can't really abstract from the upstream configuration, but one of the communities kind of needs that. Um,
Let's go back to the CPUs. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the CPUs and think about sockets and yeah, like this one. If you put those four or three options in each in a integer as in a number field, it would be easy, right?
yes, and that's what we would want to do, right? Like if we were designing the options with our, this isn't with the overrides, this is beta 4, right? In the override
Mm-hmm.
system, we would have done that. We would have done something like that when we got to this setting. The problem is
And
we'd have to hard
sorry,
code that
yeah.
for the option, and we're kind of not. The problem is, let's say that the options of this changed in the future, right? It would not be up to date. Basically, whenever you update Incus, you'd have to make sure that the all the overrides that we did, which will be basically for every single configurable option, are up to date. And then if Incus ever made changes to the way that their uh, limits and stuff are defined, it would break the entire configurable options parser. So basically, we need to create a system where um, we can have Incus make the changes that we need to do something like you just described, like having like options boxes and stuff like that. Provide a schema structured enough so we can figure out what those options would be from their API, right? That way it's always up to date. Um, but at the same time, create a component today that can adapt to those changes when that comes without rewriting the entire thing. And that's why we had to go through this like whole like modular, like the rewrite has to be like completely modular and dewired and decoupled. It's like the framework of it is more engineered than the panel because it's engineered to be completely rewrite proof in a sense. But yes, that's the goal. That's exactly what we want. We want to make these options make more sense. And that's what the Hye community wants. Um, I talked on a thread. Where is it? Here. Oh, there's many other issues with the. Look, if you guys want to see like all the blockers to do with Ararat and like what, look, this everything in this thread is like 90% of what we've been trying to fix to get Ararat to work properly. Basically, the first rewrite was primarily because we, when you set like access control on Aurora, it like wouldn't respect it properly and would break it, and it required like a whole restructuring of the whole data fetching layer and the way that the components interact with it to the point where it'd be a major refactor. We thought we could do it in like 2 weeks, or and that's like 2 or 3 weeks. So we started doing that. Then we decided, oh, we want to go off of Next.js and use Vite. So do I have it? Okay, so the issue with Next really is it's more of a server side rendering framework, but we were building a client side app. The reason we use Next is because the past two versions of our route that we ship to the Hye community use Next. But basically the issue is like, for example, we don't have fine grained control of the router. By the way, I use Ararat for my classes here, so you can see. But we'd have to do things like instance, and then we'd have to use like a query parameter for the name, and we'd have to have like the project in the like this like is horrible. Um, and not ideal at all. So we wanted more control over the router, so we moved over to Vite. Um, So V is like a structural change that pushed back it even further. Then, as we were doing that, we discovered we actually didn't even have enough endpoints to implement like the permissions that we wanted. So we had to talk about that. And then we spent like a month trying to get the configurable options to work in a way where the Hye community was going to be like okay with it, which is this. That's where we got with that, which is actually funny because I think that the official UI currently hardcodes some of this to get that. Like this, there is no way that the official interface turns these into checkboxes without hardcoding it, based on what I saw with the API. Like I just don't believe that. Um, well, it can't. So that's interesting, but we can't do that. So then we were like, okay. Well, then what we started discovering is there's actually a lot more to the hard coding. Like, there's like different options affect the availability of other ones. Before we thought that options were just inherited from profiles. That's not necessarily true. When you're creating a project, the default setting of these miscellaneous options, which we didn't even get to finishing, are inherited from the server. So we have to have like inheritance logic, uh, effect logic across different components. Um, it was becoming a mess to the point where we just wanted upstream changes for it to be sustainable on the configurable options endpoint, which would be ideal. Um, Again, it all comes back to we're gonna have to make sacrifices for the Hye community for for this to work in the future, which kind of sucks.
May I ask something?
Yeah.
Is there a way to have both simplified front end for everyone and an advanced front end for everyone at the same time to click, like a BIOS has and UEFI BIOS, and set there stuff that doesn't work at easy mode
Like a simple
anytime
mode,
later?
like a simple mode and an advanced mode.
Yeah.
Um, yes, but the issue. So the people that are after like Ararat, it's not that they don't use the advanced options that are there. It's just that they will not accept it in this. Well, this is actually nicer than what it would be in like a form like this. It needs to be normalized. But the main problem is not really the simple versus easy. The main problem is actually in the fact that we need the UI to be able to figure out what options does the user actually have the right to set and what options do they not have the right to set, right? Like based on the permissions and access and stuff like that. What are the default values for the options based on like all of the stuff that's going on like around it? Um, if I set an option like use restrictions on or off, how does that impact how these others like you see how we have like this warning system here, hard coded. How does that behave with that? Like these are things that it's not more about simple versus easy. It's more about the UI needs to actually represent the way that the options work in an accurate way. And in the past, this hasn't been an issue with Incus because Incus is primarily interfaced with the CLI. So it's not something that's like dynamic or needs to be aware of like permissions and stuff like that. But to make a good UI experience, these things just have to be there. And the main issue is really, I think this will help shed light on it. A big portion of the people that use Hye Ararat that are planning on using Hye Ararat that are members of the Hye community are people that concern themselves with multi-tenancy, like hosting companies, MSPs, stuff like that. And if they throw their client in a UI and they spend time configuring an instance and they have to wait until like they press the create button for it to suddenly fail and they lose that or they don't even know what's going on and the options being like there's a delete button but they don't even have the right to delete and the we don't even have the endpoints to get the correct access control to have like we have other things like one of the things about simplicity. Let me see if I can find it. Is this is something we were working on. We also try to have like intelligent autocomplete and stuff in everything that we have. Like for example, allowed sources, right? Well, the Incus API doesn't really give us a lot to work with, but it gives us some. Like we can kind of get an idea of like what disks, because disks are a common source, are present on the thing. So we can have like components like this that suggest them. And since we know it's a prefix list, we make the component in a way where you start typing it and you can press enter to do it early, or you can press tab to autocomplete, and then like stuff like this, right? And this is really the kind of experience that we're trying to build. Something that's seamless and you don't really have to think about it. The UI makes it make sense. You're never asking yourself, what type of input does this field take? What can I do with this? What does this mean? Um, it's not about, oh, there are some settings that I want the user not to touch, and there are some settings that I want the user to touch. It's, okay, the user opened Hye Ararat, the user knows exactly what settings do what they're looking to do, and they know how to appropriately put in an input value that works, and they're only presented with the options that they're allowed to touch, and the default values of those options are populated with what they actually are, given the rest of the Incus environment that's associated with it, right? So like in the old Ararat, we have examples of this already. Like and this is kind of where stuff started to break. Like if you're creating like a storage pool, it is aware of the storage pools that you have available to you. And actually this is a bad example. This is a horrible component that we need to rewrite. Um what's a good example of this? I think the project selector does this in this version too. Cluster groups. It knows to have a component to select like the proper group, right? But if we just depended on the Incus API for the way that that worked, this would literally just be a text field where you have to type in like the comma separated list of like all your stuff. That is an unacceptable user experience for the people that are on the high side of this, right? And it may be acceptable to people that currently use the CLI in Incus and kind of understand what's going on, but the whole point of the UI, in terms of the Incus UI, in my opinion, is to bring new people into the fold, people that Incus didn't provide an experience to them that would make it viable for them to use, right? But if we just don't pay attention to these things, right, and do these like workarounds to kind of work with what we currently have, rather than thinking about, how do we get people in here that how do we give people what do we have, you have to really come back to why are we building what we are building, and what does it need to do to get there, right? Um, you need stuff like this. You can't work with the current way that the API works. So that's the main thing. Now we are planning on eliminating all of the hard coding in Ararat in this rewrite, which means that people are going to lose features like this. They're even going to lose features like the allow block drop down and all of this because we can't get it from the API. And we don't want to have hard coding, and this is all about not ever needing a rewrite if Incus adds stuff upstream, right? The Hye community is going to be very upset with that. Now, the extensions that we're making can temporarily modify that behavior, right? Like someone could make an extension that changes the way that some of these options are rendered with some hard coded data, and then technically Ararat doesn't have hard coding, so technically it's okay. But we're I'm not going to maintain that configurable options index. That's ridiculous. So really, uh, it's fine. I'm not saying anything like. By the way, this can be misinterpreted so easily as like saying something bad about Incus. I'm not saying anything bad about Incus. Just to be clear, I'm just saying this. Um, Ararat needs to be built in a way where Incus, as Incus matures in these sorts of things, because obviously upstream changes are needed to provide the experience we need. We can't have Ararat needing to be rewritten to get there, right? I'm not saying all of this to get at Incus. I'm not saying all this to like start a campaign like, oh, we need to change it. No, that's not what that is. They're already very responsive to this sort of stuff, and they are well aware of the issues that are present. But what I am saying is that when we develop our route, we need to think about the future. We need to think about this is the experience that we're working towards. These are the types of people that are going to be using Hye Ararat, and this is an architecture that we need to select so that when we have the tools that we need in the back to bring that experience forward, we don't have to do a major rewrite again to get there. We don't like doing rewrite. Like the original Ararat, before I released it, I spent, well, first off, while I was at Zentane, since it's been in development actually since 2023, the Ararat Yedek, there have been prototypes of that version of Ararat with the way that it works since 2023. I worked at Zentane at the time, so it wasn't really much of a priority. After I left Zentane in mid 2025, that's when we started developing the version of Ararat like for a while, and then in I think it was October or September, that's when we decided, okay, actually we're gonna go the direction Incus needs like a interface. We're building something that will be great as the foundation for that. It would also hold us accountable to keep making sure all the power tools are there, and um it would look, we rely on Incus every day, right? And it's an open source project by people that are very dedicated to maintaining it. How do you make sure that an open source project is mature? Well, it needs to have people using it, and it needs to grow and expand. So basically, the way that we see it is at the Hye company, and I hope that this rests any doubt that the Hye company is like doing anything like canonical or anything like that. At the Hye company, the way we think about it is Incus is our foundation, and the more people that use Incus, the more mature Incus becomes, and that's a good thing for everyone, including us. So if we can make a interface that brings more people to Incus, that is amazing. But the thing is, that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about bringing more people to Incus. We want as many people using Incus as possible. So that's kind of the.
What about wizards?
What about what?
Wizards. A wizard that you can have to create a new machine as simple as possible.
What about what?
Wizard. I don't know
Can
how
you
to
type it?
spell. Yeah, I will type it on YouTube.
Okay.
Wizard.
Wizard. I would actually argue that
Yeah.
I would argue that this is a wizard. You see this?
Yeah.
Properties, source, devices, configuration. That's a wizard.
Yeah, and keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and that's what we
hide.
that's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Hide features that people don't need to
Yeah.
have there.
And this is exactly what we do. Like we don't want to abstract Incus's foundation because, oh, this is the other thing. Aura is the API of Incus is amazing. It's amazing that we have a hypervisor. Just think of it for a second. That gives us the level. I mean, you have a hypervisor when you deploy a VM. It can have an image that has an agent inside of it that exposes like file management APIs. Like, it's amazing that we have this. Like, it's the most novel hypervisor that I've ever, like, it's amazing. I love Incus so much. We don't want to abstract that in Aurora. We don't want to abstract that. So what we do is with the wizard, we're like, okay, in the actual YAML, we have a source, we have some metadata like profiles and names and stuff like that. We don't want to abstract that at all. So what we'll do is we're going to keep the tabs there, but the things that's the configuration, we'll keep that all in one. So we keep devices and configuration consolidated because we don't want to abstract that because it makes it so Aurora is a great learning tool still for learning how Incus works, what the configurable options are, and keeping people. That's something we're fixing in the rewrite. The annoying notifications are going to go away. Well, there'll be notifications, but just once they're applicable. That's something that we spent a long time on. I didn't get it back. So yeah, very big believer in wizards, but we do it in a way where it doesn't abstract. We believe that. So I actually think that like the way Proxmox does it with like hiding advanced options, I consider it like lazy because it's like it's not that the user doesn't, when you hide an option, it's more like if you don't know what you're doing, don't touch this. I don't see it as a this option needs to be hidden because it's difficult to understand. If the option is difficult to understand, that means that it's just not being presented correctly. That's my opinion. I think that with good UX and UI design, you can make any option easy to understand. And we tried to do that actually in Ararat. If you look at we got really creative with how we were gonna do this. Like uh and this, if you look very carefully on devices that have enough power to run the Chromium Summarizer API, we literally in the web UI. Do you know how this summarization worked? It would fetch the Incus docs using a search tool that we built, figure out the exact markdown header that this is described under, get that excerpt, send it to an on-device LLM, so you don't have to pay for tokens or anything, a summarizer model, and it would summarize the documentation on device without going like. We really think about creative. We're willing to do whatever we have to do to get creative ways for people to understand what options do and present them. Now, this was again, this was not simple enough for the Hye community, so it was a step in the right direction, but we failed. Ultimately, something like what we're doing here is probably, and obviously this is incomplete. Like this is gonna have hover cards here, and stuff like that. This is a prototype, right? It was never fully built out. But the concept here of like having UI components native to the actual option, that makes sense. Like you don't ever feel like you have to go to the docs and read about it. It's like I said at the beginning. You shouldn't have, if you're using Ararat, if you have a UI in front of you, we have all the tools to make it so you don't need to go to the documentation to understand. And the best way to understand something, in my opinion, look at all the best programmers in the world. The best people that code and the best people that understand things are the people that not the people that like went to school or got like undergraduate degree or any of that. But the people that built their own things and have been in the weeds themselves. And the point I make with that is they learn through doing. They learn through interaction. The most effective way of learning something is through interactivity. And if we build like a configurable option system in a way that you can learn through interactivity, you've solved the whole problem, right? So it's a very advanced challenge, but it's worth it and it's required because the way I see it, Incus wants a UI. Really, the deeper meaning behind all of it is Incus has the back end to blow, and I mean no disrespect to the Proxmox developers or any of them. I do mean disrespect to the VMware people because I don't like them. Huh? But the hypervisor is developed enough to absolutely blow those solutions out of the water. And the reason that they're even doing, the reason they have traction is because of the interface, not really because of what's underlying. Yes, VMware gets a lot of its enterprise from like stupid underlying stuff like their stupid like vSAN. Bro, I can't even get into that. I don't like VMware. But a big part of it is the UI. And the it has to be native to that. And that's really, in my opinion, the only thing that is stopping Incus from taking that next step into real like a explosion of growth is this type of surface. The other thing is Incus, as I said, has a wonderful API and a wonderful CLI. Do you know what those are great for? AI agents. A lot of people control services now with AI agents, and Proxmox doesn't really have the tools to make something seamless like that. VMware definitely doesn't. But if you make
Proxmox has a great API.
it does, but it isn't. I guess the thing with Incus is kind of built on the concept of having like primitives, and the primitives are reusable across many components. Like you have a managed network that's very reusable and has all sorts of abstraction built on it that makes it very easy to manipulate, right? When I say API, I don't necessarily mean the robustness of the API, like how many endpoints it has. I more so mean uh, the approachability to get to do what you want with it, right? If you were to do like 90% of the things that we're able to do with Incus with just a single endpoint in Proxmox, you'd have to build like custom tooling around the endpoints and functions and wrappers. Incus' API is so well designed that an AI agent with some good documentation, like a skills file on how the endpoints work, doesn't even need to be the API. Give it CLI docs, can do everything that you basically want with managing your your infra itself. And that's a big deal. Like nobody else really has a hypervisor that will be able to do that. And we see that exactly for what it is when we're looking at Ararat. We see that for exactly what it is. So when you combine that, like the fact that Incus already has the potential to be a really really good surface for this trend of agentic infrastructure, in addition to some development here with the UI, um, I really don't see how a home lab user or an enterprise or a or anyone would be able to justify the other solutions. Yeah, exactly. The Incus CLI, really great with agents. It's just so easy to understand. It's so easy to understand. You just have to just read a little bit from the help commands and all that, and you know exactly what to do. And the whole like image system and everything makes it just so easy. Not only that, you want to know what makes it really powerful? The thing that makes Incus most powerful isn't even just the hypervisor. It's the fact that it has elevated the standard for what a hypervisor does by thinking in terms of we're not just going to make the tools that you need to deploy your infrastructure and manage its primitives. We're going to give you the tools to actually get inside. File management APIs, command execution, agents in the VMs. They don't think of these as optional. The Incus maintainers and the community of Incus says this is essential. And that's also what gives it a huge edge over everyone else. Because if you gave like a Proxmox API or whatever to like a AI agent, to get inside, it would probably make some like complex SSH cloud init configuration, then make some like polling script that like polls to see if is the thing online yet? Is the thing online yet? Is the thing online? And then it would like try to go in and do it like that's not really AI native, right? Now Incus, the API does all of that for you, and that's crazy because it turns from not just this is what I want to create. This is the primitive I want to create. Proxmox is more about I want to make a VM. I want to make a network. I want to make this. Incus thinks deeper. They're like, this is what I want to do with that VM. I'm going to give you the tools you need to do what you need to do from the hypervisor level to make your life easy. That's the way that they think, and that is also why we can make if we can make a UI um around Incus that that encompasses all of that, it's ridiculous, bro. Like, think of it. I don't have my storage pool is full, ironically, so I can't start a VM. But think of it. You have a file. Okay, this is an example of the bug I was talking about earlier with the stale. But you have a file manager for your VMs. Like this concept sounds impossible to anyone on any other hypervisor. But here, this is second nature. Like, what? If you make a VM on Proxmox, by the way, they don't even default to like serial console or any of that. You're in like your crappy no VNC session. Not here. Not only that, Incus is default. You can use VNC if you like change the way your queuing is done, but you have the full power of Spice. And the hypervisor handles it all for you. You know, normally when you're orchestrating QEMU with Spice, you have to like handle like port creation, and then you have to like create your own like WebSockify proxy system, stuff like that. No, Incus does all that for you, and and you get the full power of the Spice protocol, and that's how we're able, like in the Ararat console, we wrote a custom Spice client from scratch in Rust that renders all of the textures on your web GPU, on your GPU using the web GPU API, uses the native GPU cache and all of that to literally give you something that it's like you installed something in the VM to remote desktop in. That's what it feels like. Like it's crazy. And that's again, it's just second nature, and it's all because of Incus. If Ararat was like Proxmox UI, which kind of sounds stupid because Proxmox already has a UI, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Or I mean, you could, but like, not really. It would kind of suck. So Incus is the key to like everything here. Incus is like a it's such a gold mine that I feel like so little people in the greater infrastructure community don't have their eye on. It's kind of like knowing about ChatGPT before everyone knows about ChatGPT. That's my what I think of Incus as, right? Like it's like crazy. And honestly, this is the other thing. What's beautiful about Incus is you have all this, and it's all community driven and open, and you have this great community around it. You know how like the Hye Ararat is a little bit of a struggle because we have a fragmented community. We have the Hye community and the Incus community. They have different expectations, all of that. Now I'm kind of going more in on the Incus side, but after all, it is all built on Incus, so credit where credit is due. Um, a big problem with Incus right now is definitely the fact that the LXD community and the Incus community have a line in the sand right now, right? And that's not good. That's really bad. You don't want that, especially something with so much promise as Incus has. And I'm gonna be honest, LXD kind of has lost the. I'm gonna show an example. I don't really pay attention with what's going on with LXD, but I remember back in 2022. I remember RF's been around for a while. We had to face the critical um, decision of whether we were going to continue using LXD or whether we were going to move to Incus, right? And ultimately, we decided to move to Incus. Um, I think the main reason was we really didn't like the Incus UI, the LXD UI was like being shipped every because from a product standpoint, let's say that we get the Hye company, you guys don't understand this. Let's say that we had like an enterprise customer, right, or a hosting company customer at some point outside the scope of our route. We're not going to monetize like the Incus community. You don't have to worry about that. Um, why would we want the LXD UI being installed when we install our software? When Canonical is actively seeking enterprise contracts at the same time. You see, what's great about Incus is it's like neutral in terms of this, and we're keeping RROT neutral too. By the way, we're not gonna opinionate any business model into RROT or anything like that. It's one thing to install the LXD UI when you install LXD with it, like they're doing now, but it's a whole other thing when you have the business model behind that that's like, yeah, we're gonna sell all of this like enterprise stuff, get your like Ubuntu Pro up and all that. It's like, what? That was one of the reasons. But just looking at the direction that it's gone, I'm gonna show some. By the way, it's really sad that Canonical is like a. And you know what? Something about me, I don't really have a filter when it comes to this type of stuff. Like I'm not gonna hold myself back on Canonical. I'm really upset with what they did. I think that it is a sham that they I think it's ridiculous that they purported themselves to be like community driven. They tried to set up like the whole LXD discourse on their end, right? And then they go and they relicense the whole thing under AGPL and make you sign a CLA to contribute. And it's like, really? But whatever. Beyond that, let's take a look at the APIs. One of the great things about Incus is it's very light. Um, why do they have this? They're becoming so opinionated with LXD that they're like baking in the like what should be your FGA server into the freaking panel. I don't even know what this is. I don't really care. Okay, I can't look at this because I'm doing API design. I might be doing API design, but I don't even want to poison my brain with that. But from my perspective, the takeaway is they're doing OpenFGA like the server is built into the thing. One of the things that's great about Incus is they let you pick and choose what like you get packaged with it and all that, and they try to keep the hypervisor nice and lean and light. Like they don't put all this stuff in there. They externalize that stuff. You want like graphing? Okay, install Grafana. You want authentication? Well, we support various drivers. Install an OpenFGA server. You manage it. This was actually very useful because there was a time where like the FGA server that was maintained. This was back at the Hye company. Wasn't good enough for what we needed. So what we did at the time is we took the OpenFGA API spec and we made a custom FGA server that did the exact same thing as OpenFGA, but the backend was like completely different. And that allowed us to do authorization on Incus because it had an FGA driver without actually using OpenFGA. That's what we did. You couldn't do that with LXD. So like they're heading the wrong way. I think one of the main reasons why people have stuck with LXD this long is because they the UI is under their roof and they're like kind of trying to maintain this tight canonical ecosystem. And yes, there are some strides Incus has made that make Incus obviously better, like OCI image support. But if someone doesn't care about that, that's not going to move the needle. What will definitely move the needle if all of a sudden Incus has like a sudden spike in community members and they're suddenly taking on Proxmox's market share, which Canonical has been desperately trying to do with the LXD UI and has only failed. And they refuse to look at it and like think to pivot. Like they don't look at it and think like, we developed this LXD UI and people are not like adopting it, and we have not penetrated the market share that we need, and it's been like 3 years. No, maybe we should change. No, they don't think like that. They think like, oh, we're gonna just continue doing what like it is stupid, right? Stupid. Um, it's because they're like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm an Incus user as well. Like I'm a user. I understand like the user side. I'm also I also have like my own like home lab setup, so I understand that perspective as well. And at the other side, I've also run like hosting companies in the past, so I also understand what it's like to have people that don't know a lot about managing infrastructure and having like a multi-tenant system where you have to have people loaded onto that. So I have a little bit of a very unique perspective on like that kind of makes me think things that most people wouldn't think of. But really, from a business standpoint, it's inexcusable what they're doing. I really honestly believe that the second that Incus breaks out with um, with these surfaces, LLM surfaces and UI surface, um, Canonical's LXD is not gonna have a fun time, and hopefully we're finally gonna have some unity around where code-based contributions are going. Like right now, I imagine if you have like a bug fix and you contribute to LXD and you do it under GPL and then like you want to do it into Incus, it's probably like it's like a disaster. We just can't have it the way that it is. It's just not ideal. So yeah. Oh, this bug pisses me off so much. This is fixed in the rewrite, by the way. I know that we went like way overtime with this. I got like really, I got some really great questions. I thought we were gonna focus more on like Ararat's architecture, but this kind of turned into like we did definitely did talk about the architecture, but this is also kind of turned into talking about like the bigger picture here, which is interesting. I get really passionate about that. Um, yeah. Let me know if there are any other questions, any of this that you want me to elaborate on. you know what? I'm so worried that I said something that I'm gonna regret. Like I I just said a lot about like canonical and like the state of things. Do not clip me out of context. In context, it makes sense. I take no prisoners. I feel like I've heard that term before. I take no prisoners. I don't even know. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. 5 years. It's gonna be really, really interesting to start this rewrite because it's gonna be like, yeah, no, I'm not looking forward. I'm not looking forward to it. It's gonna be really cool when it's done though. I think I covered all of this. Oh, except for this. Basically, this is just about modularity. Like, because Ararat is like, okay, so let's say, like, for example, the authorization blocked us for a long time. Like, if you remember on Ararat, we like did beta 1, we did beta 2, it was a big deal. We did beta 3, we didn't really have much that to like show. Under the hood, this was actually one of the biggest updates that we ever did because we redid like the whole data fetching system so that, oh, it's so cool what we did. Basically, we used the we used the event emitter to mutate everything that's in the UI live. So basically, when you connect it to Ararat, it would connect to the event socket. And let's say that you had the instance list open, right? And with the update to beta 3, one of the big things that we did was an event would get emitted like instant start, right? The UI would immediately update from the event. And it's not like it was tied to the component that showed the state of that. It was just updating like universal state management. This was a really cool update. Um, and so I wouldn't really call that much of a blocker. Um, where did the blockers start? Oh, this is where they started. That's right. Authorization is where they started. And to basically to address the authorization, we had to like refactor like a bunch of the code base to the point where it was going to be basic. It would have taken like 3 weeks, but it would have been like rewriting a lot of the components. So we decided to just tackle some of the other issues. And then we discovered other issues as we were doing that. But basically, the architecture of this that can never happen because the whole thing is modular. Like if we need to do a let's say we need to do a full stack change, like which is like one of the worst things that you could ever need to do, which is what we did by the way here. We went from Next.js to V. Full stack change. It would be very easy to do because all of the logic is separated. Like the JS logic, like the logic that runs in the backend, the state management stuff, completely separate from the UI part. Um, so basically, any major things that need to be changed, it's no longer going to be like you have to go through every single area of the code base to adapt it. it's you change it in one place, or you migrate a subset of a section, and now the repo is that way. So it's very easy to modify. Basically, um, this architecture requires like tons and tons and tons of advanced planning, um, and it's going to take a long time. I'm very concerned with I'm very concerned. I will say this. I'm very concerned with the roadmap here because I do return to university towards the end of August, and um, this is a very ambitious rewrite. I don't know if I can write the key is, can Joseph, with hopefully the help of others, like please, can we? I don't know if we're gonna get more contributors, so I want more contributors. Like if you can if you want to contribute to this, please help me. It's like here's the crux of the issue. Once the foundation is done here, building all of the Incus functionality is going to be like a piece of cake. But that foundation, given this, is just as complex as all the functionality that we built in the up till beta 4, which took a long time. And engineering wise, it's more to wrap your head around. If I can't get the foundation done by the time that happens, that's not a good place to be. Um, I don't know if I can because velocity is going to slow down. Now, there are some things going on at the Hye company, like uh, I don't know how much I can talk about, but basically we're trying to get like investors and stuff like that that would potentially allow me to go. Um, it would allow me to literally drop everything and go full time with Hye. Um, but that's a big if. So we'll see. Hopefully we can finish this. We have about 2 months. Um, and yeah. Anyways, I think that we covered pretty much everything that there is to cover. Um, we didn't really um, get into the real weeds of like the architecture and stuff like that, but that's okay. I think I got the concepts across, and they seemed pretty well received. Um, I will see y'all soon. Peace.